Hello, internet friends, and welcome to Keep the Game Moving. And this time, I am so excited to have one of my fellow Big Bad Con online, just happened a little while ago, uh, staff people, Kandi from the Dicey Amazons. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So Kandi is the G. Are you the all-time? Are you just the forever GM of the Amazons?
Pretty much, yeah. I'm trying to get them to do like some one shots, but yeah.
Yeah. So the Dicey Amazons are an awesome streaming channel. It is all women and non-binary folks of color, which we need so much more of. Awesome to have that, but just putting that aside, it's just fun. Like the you guys are the epitome of that. Y'all, I should say, not you. Y'all are the epitome of the two Texans talking here. Y'all are the epitome of that friends. You know, you've got that shorthand at the table. Everybody's laughing, referring things that happened like 10 years ago, and like busting each other's chops, and that just makes for me, that just pulls me in.
Yeah.
And it makes for such a good vibe at the table. How do you foster that other than being friends for,
Well, we like to just kind of have a lot of fun. And so our group sort of came together, and I can't say organically because there was a purpose behind us starting like our group. And so like me and one of the Amazons, Christy, we've been friends since I moved to Texas. So that's about 20 years, almost 20 years now. The other is I actually only met in 2018 when we started, or when we kind of started playing.
Because you were gonna be a streaming channel like from the go, right?
No.
No.
Yeah.
It was a home game?
Yeah, so I was doing this home game, this sort of family home game with a bunch of friends down here. And then I started, actually, it's kind of weird. I actually started going to like slam poetry in town, and ended up meeting a bunch of the other Amazons. And so some of them had always wanted to play. One of them, their father was just like, no, it's, evil, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So they never got to play. And so I was like, you know what? I really want to get it together a game where we have like women and non-binary people, right? And so I just kind of wanted a little bit different from the other home game that we were playing. And so I said, hey, let's go. Let's get this together. And so it actually started up with me and 7 other people. Yeah.
That's a full table.
I can't say no to people who want to play. But we had a few people drop out because of life stuff. And so we had been playing at home. And my best friend's husband would he'd be serving us snacks and stuff and just listening. And he'd be laughing. He's like, you all are so hilarious. Like, y'all should really think about streaming. And so I had been thinking about it, but I hadn't mentioned it to anybody just yet because I had been watching, some streams at the time. And I'm like, we could probably do this. And so we thought about it, and, we were like, okay, let's do this.
So how did you, even before the Amazons, how did you get your start GMing?
Oh, so I actually, when I kind of started back up, I had sort of this long break from playing, and I started back up. I actually started watching some streams. And
oh, wow. So that is a long break.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a really long break because I actually started in college and playing in college, but I had never GM'd then. We always had somebody else's that was GMing, and then I had a long break. And then about 8 years ago, I was watching some streams. There wasn't a lot out then, but I just kind of ran across some, and I'm like, oh man, I want to play again. And so I was the one that decided, that asked my family and friends, hey, who wants to play? And I said, the Dicey Amazons group kind of started big, before Dicey Amazons, but this one really started big because there was 13 people the first night. Some people just kind of wanted to try it, and just okay, cool, and weren't really planning on sticking with us. But that one ended up being me plus a total of 8 people, but there were some people that had school and things, so they would sort of drop in and out.
guest stars
type thing. And so yeah, I was GMing. I got all into like, you know, building the maps and just the whole storytelling and buying 3D printers and just like, oh, I'm gonna do do all of this.
How do you I'm trying to imagine with 8 people, just like the entire game is just everyone's backstory. You're just like, you know, you don't even have to make a game. Just like, all right, you've got a cousin, and you know, like you can.
It really is. It's a lot more role playing usually when you have that many people. Combat does take a bit. I found some ways to kind of shorten combat a little bit, and you know, to kind of work through that so it wasn't as long. But I do like that a lot of the games with more players end up being like more role play because they just really get into it and there's just more people to bounce things off of.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I haven't run a big table in a while. You know, I'm usually in the 6, 7, you know, at most range. But that's interesting that you found that it sort of, and I wonder if that was specifically that crew, or have you found that to be true in other games?
I think it depends on the people because that group, like that family group, was definitely a bunch of, you know, family and friends. Like we'd always hang out, you know, for holidays and all these other things. So we were always around each other and always just having fun anyway. So I was really happy when we sort of ended up with that same thing with the Dicey Amazons, even though like most of the group I hadn't known for very long. It just ended up being that we all really meshed well with each other and just, you know, just a really, like, we've been friends forever.
and when you were running D&D then?
Yeah, I was running D&D then.
Was that like 4th edition or?
No, it was 8 years ago. So it was 5th edition.
Wow, 5th edition has been out for 8 years?
Yeah, it's been.
Now I feel a little old.
Yeah.
And how did you make the shift from running D&D? Like, what kind of opened your eyes to the other systems being out there?
So just watching like more streams popping up, and so being able to see like other games. So I think what do you call it? Vampire was one that I had seen kind of early on, and then started getting into some like really indie stuff as well. So like just smaller games that people had like self-published and things like that. And so you're really just kind of getting into the indie scene a little bit more through streams at first, and then through community, like meeting people and everything like that. Yeah.
Did you have a local game store that was good for that? Or I don't, I'm trying to remember if there's one in San Antonio. I don't, oh, sorry. Undisclosed location.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, we say we're in San Antonio, so you're good. But there are, but actually, like I'm actually talking about like the online TTRPG community. So
right,
yeah, like just people coming into our streams, making a community, and then just meeting more and more people. And so that's how I learned a lot about different games and things.
Getting invited to other streams online. And that sort of thing. Play things,
exactly.
Yeah. And that and then, you know, once you play something, then you're like, I don't know about you, but if I play something, I always then start thinking about GMing it. Like that's my natural thing. Is like, how would I run this game? You know,
yeah.
What always happens there.
You know, it's funny you say that though, because I started actually creating my own games last year, last September, so less than a year ago, and I've got to the point like, okay, like how would I GM this? But I'm also have a couple of games where I'm like, I don't want to GM for this. And so I've written a few games like
deep
that.
feelings games and stuff like, you know, like well that's fascinating to me because I have never I've designed board games, but I wouldn't even like know how to design a role play. Like I can't even. I'm like the guy looking at the chalkboard with all the stuff on it.
Yeah.
Like, because just the mechanics of it are so important, and so, you know, like so when you're designing a game, is it, oh, I've got this cool idea, now let's find some mechanics to kind of prop it up, or is it like, oh, this is a neat thing to do with cards or something?
Yeah, a little bit of both, actually. So the very first game I actually wrote because there was a game jam going on through the Utopia community. And it was actually, I'd seen it. I didn't know exactly what it was. I hadn't looked a lot into game jams, and it was the very last day of the game jam, and I was bored that day. And I was like, well, let me, try to create a game. So that first one, I was like, okay, I need an idea first. And so I came up with this idea first based off of sort of this comic book story that I've been just sort of writing forever. And then I put mechanics to it. And so what I found since then, that was in September. Since then, I've released 3 other games, and I've got like 2 or 3 other ones that I'm working on.
Are these on itch, or where can you?
Yeah, they're on itch. I do have an itch.
It sounds is that how you say that? I don't know. I'm old, yeah. So that's really cool.
But since then, it's kind of gone a bit both ways. And so there's kind of this sort of a bigger game. It's actually the biggest game that I've come up with so far. And that one I actually did come up with the idea first, but I really dug into mechanics, because this game it's kind of interesting. It doesn't have combat. But it still has conflict. And so basically, if you've heard of the African folktale Brer Rabbit, it's based off of that, in which he tries to get out of things without fighting. Basically, he tries to use his wits.
Okay, so trickster god, kind of all that stuff.
Exactly. And so I needed some mechanics that would fit that well enough to come across as conflict. And so I ended up reading, oh my goodness, over like the course of like a month and a half, maybe, I ended up reading probably a couple of 100 games. I have a bunch of the itch bundles where there's hundreds of games in them. And so I started looking through those first. And then once I kind of figured out like a thread of what I wanted, then I was able to kind of search for more specific things. And so found a couple of games that had something similar to what I was looking for. And so then was able to kind of take the pieces from those games and say, I think this is what'll fit for the mechanics for this game.
That I love the idea of an entire party of Brer Rabbits, as it's just this constant, like, nobody takes responsibility for anything, It's like, no, it wasn't me. Don't make me do it, like that. That's a really cool idea. So how did you talk a little bit about those mechanics? Because now I'm interested.
So for this game, it ended up being, and I've play tested it a few times. I'm actually going to be play testing it at Gen Con,
nice.
which is wild to say, but
people paying to play your game,
right? So this one, it sort of ended up with it's a TTRPG, but it ended up with a couple of like board game and card mechanics. And so as you're playing, one person is playing the rabbit, and the other people are playing their friends. So it's actually a GM-less game, but rabbit is sort of the focus of the story. But everybody sort of makes the decisions. And so as you're supposed to be traveling home to the Briar Patch in a specific amount of time. And so there is like a time variant in this game. And as you're going, Rabbit's friends are actually putting up obstacles for Rabbit. And it's not like aggressive obstacles. It is more like, oh, I'm super sleepy. This looks like a really comfortable haystack. I want to stay here. And Rabbit is like, okay, no, we gotta go. Right. And so depending
mine would always be I'm hungry.
Right, exactly. And that's one of them. Like, with the character sheets that you make up, there's hungry, there's scared, there's, sleepy, there's all sorts of things. And so so you actually roll dice, and depending on who wins, Rabbit gains what's called wit tokens. And so during those friends obstacles. And then at the end, it's based on 5 acts. At the end of the first act, or each act, I should say, you have a big bad. And so one of the players becomes the big bad.
Neat.
Yeah. And so then Rabbit is able to spend wit tokens and get help from friends to be able to beat the big bad. And so that part is actually based off of cards. So you're spending your tokens based off of cards. So that part is sort of like Magic, where each card has a specific thing that you're supposed to do, or that you can do. And it basically just gives you like prompts for your next action. And so for this one, let's say, you're actually grabbed by the big bad. Now you got to talk your way out of it. And you spend tokens if you have that card on you in your hand.
That's a really, it's also a really kind of neat show into how constraints can really can build creativity.
Exactly.
Because sort of using board game mechanics to constrain, and using the time limit thing to constrain things can really make for some interesting decisions.
Yeah, it really does. And and so, like I said, it's based off of 5 acts. And so you do the 5 acts, you have different locations, and the players basically create those locations at the beginning of each act. And so everybody creates what's there to work off of as well, which I really like, because you can say, oh, this happens, in like an RPG, but a lot of times it's like, okay, is that really there? But if you are building the world together, then you're like, yeah, that's there, and this is what I'm going to use it for, to bounce off of and to continue the story.
Have you found, I'm probably going to ask this question in the most ignorant way possible, but
Okay.
In my head, when I think of Brer Rabbit, I think of kind of the Disneyfied Song of the South, like, version we don't talk about anymore.
Yeah.
And so, how do you sort of take that back?
That is actually the whole point of me making this game. Like Brer Rabbit, the idea of being able to get through conflict without actually being like aggressive or anything like that was just really like a thing that I clung to as a kid. And so, that story has always been, awesome to me, except for the slavery and all of that stuff that it was. And like, it's an African folktale, but when I was doing my research before kind of starting the game, like everybody that has actually profited off of this game since the mid 1800s has been white.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, this is not cool. I'm going to reclaim the original character of the African folktale and the trickster god, because it's based off of Anansi, which is an African god.
I was going to say.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and I have it. I like, it's in my stuff. It's like, this is a reclamation of the story.
That's awesome.
And like, it's not set like during slavery. It's actually set in Africa. And so the locations that like the ideas and the things to help you fill in your location is Africa.
I think that's, it's been awesome to see more Afrocentric, but I'm also going to say just straight Black themes and locations and systems coming into role playing. Because I think, I'm thinking, especially like right now, I'm thinking of Haunted West, which is fantastic.
Yes.
But like, there's a lot of people like, well, I don't know if I feel comfortable running that. And it's like, no, this is how someone like me can start to tell stories that will help me in some small way understand the everyday experience of folks that aren't like me. That aren't, and this game is another great example of that, of taking, something that has this kind of baggage, loaded onto it, and saying, well, here's what it actually was, and here's how everybody can enjoy this.
Yeah, that's exactly. Thank you so much.
I'm psyched for what's the name of the game?
It is called Briarbound. Yeah.
Well, I'm if we both make it to Big Bad Con, I want to try this because it sounds fantastic.
Oh yeah, I will absolutely be bringing it if I make it to Big Bad Con.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You heard it here, Nittner. So we both run games on stream, and it's a weird world. I always joke it's like you're 50% GM and 50% game show host. And so how do you kind of reconcile those kind of things, and how do you kind of keep the stream moving as it were?
Yeah, so not only am I the GM and sort of the host, but I'm also the producer.
Oh man,
when we do,
you're in OBS doing all that.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh no. Oh man.
So I try to keep it as simple as possible, because I am doing all of those things. And like when we were first thinking about this, I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna, once we, I guess, get to a certain point, we'll have maybe somebody else producing that's not playing, and all this other things. And of course, with COVID happening and everything like that, it's too kind of hard to do it. At this point, I could totally have somebody do it, but at this point, I think I'm just like,
yeah,
it's just I'm used to it.
So, how do you kind of keep the flow going while simultaneously going, and thanks Sean Nittner for 500 bits, like it's like, I find that very challenging personally.
It definitely can be challenging. So when we actually playing TTRPGs, because we do other streams, like we do video games and all sorts of other things. So like and I think like our community, we've had them for a while, and so they know that we're usually a bit more active with, hey, thank you for this and all that for like other streams. For TTRPGs, we do it a bit, but we try to keep it more towards the beginning of the stream. But every once in a while, we'll just kind of be like in the middle of the game and just say, oh, hey, thank you, so we try to keep it a little bit more out of the game when we can.
Yeah. See, I'm lucky. I have a producer who will put up, I have like, to fully make the game show thing, I have a monitor that I'm looking at like all the way across the room, and they put up like, here are the bits that came in and that sort of thing, and nice. Hey idiot, here are the announcements you need to remember, because I'm not remembering it. But it is funny because one of the things, so we use bits as inspiration. And that's completely broken the game. It's like like, if you want to talk mechanics, the economy of the game has just been so shattered by the generosity of our viewers, which thank you, but I'd like to kill somebody sometime, please. So how do you guys use bits in that way to sort of incentivize people giving them, but not destroy the game?
So we actually don't. We haven't yet. And it's something I've thought about. I don't know if I want to try it during a campaign necessarily. But I've been thinking about doing it during like some one-shots here and there. Because like during one-shots, we're usually, it's usually wild anyway, right? Just,
they're rental cars.
Story. Yeah, it's a short story. Like they usually end up a little bit more wilder than campaigns. And so I've actually been thinking about doing it for our next like one shot. But for a campaign, I feel like usually like we have a story that we want to tell, and I feel like that would kind of mess it up a little bit too much. Now, what we do use is the channel points for kind of light things, and so you can use channel points to like name a character,
fun,
and things like that.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant on.
It is an so it really depends on the game, but actually, the guy who runs our channel, he made a deck of cards. And so when people give inspiration, it's not a reroll. You draw a card, and the cards do various much more potentially minor and more situational things. And so that's one solution. But he runs D&D and I run Call of Cthulhu, so I got to make my own deck or at some point. But these are things that I never thought about as a GM. Like it never occurred to me that my players would have 15 rerolls. Which changes the challenge level of things, sort of, and you have to like balance that.
Actually, one of the games that I've been thinking about like doing that with is sort of a battle royale, because those are already super wild,
right?
And so to really get the audience to like really be able to kind of to help or hinder.
Well, and then you can get into like I'm betting on Kandi. You can bet on your favorite player in the battle royale.
Absolutely.
That sort of thing. That would be that's kind of fun. A buddy of mine ran a 24-hour Massive Nyarlathotep is this ridiculous huge campaign. And he ran a 24-hour charity stream of it. And if you gave bits, you rolled on this ridiculous chart that was like, there were like 1,000 things on this chart.
Yeah.
And like some of them were just like you gain an artifact, and some of them were like, here's 6 temporary hit point. It was totally not balanced at all, but it was just utterly random. And that works for like, to your point, a one shot where like zaniness is like, we did a one shot. Our own lady Bedivere ran a game that she made, and the joke was every time somebody made a bit, they got to suggest an accent that I would use for my character. And so I kept changing accents all through the game, but I don't want to do that in a campaign for when I have to remember all that stuff. How do you so now that you've gone remote, but you were playing in the same place for a while, but now that you're remote, like the tech stuff kind of comes more into it as well. And as a producer, like how do you kind of deal with tech issues during the game and stuff like that?
So
there's your answer. That's I know that.
Actually, the tech stuff has actually gotten easier since we've gotten remote. Because and part of that was because of what I was running everything on when we first started. I was running everything like we were, like I said, in one room. We had the whole like what do you call it? We had like built out like a thing that would hold
right?
Mics, like mics and cameras and all stuff like that. So we don't need any of that stuff anymore. So I have a whole lot less stuff actually connected to my computer.
That's true.
So it actually, like, the tech has actually gotten easier since we've been remote. And for the most part, I think we've gotten really good at, like, once we're going, we're good, except for one thing, which is like one of our players is having an issue with like their camera not working for things. And we haven't done it with the TTRPG yet because we haven't started it back up since this issue has happened. And so like that's something that we are going to have to try to fix. And I think what we're going to do, because she's playing on a laptop, so what we've decided on is we're actually just going to get her a desktop. To be able, and we think it's because of the laptop and like all the stuff that we're doing and stuff like that.
It's running so many things, especially if you're going into Roll20 or anything like that. Like my wife's laptop hovers off the ground if she has more than two things. The fans are going so hard at that point. Do you? I don't know. Do you prefer running games on stream, off stream? Do you have a preference? Are they kind of equal?
I feel like I actually would prefer in person, but I feel like it's easier remote. And so like it's just kind of like a little torn. Like I would love to play with all the Amazons again in person, but unfortunately we do have people
you play
not
in
the city anymore. So but so I'll get my in-person elsewhere, I guess. So the people that still live here will do like other games outside of streaming. We play a lot of board games as well, and so I get that at least from something else.
Nice. Yeah, you get that feeling, which these days anywhere you can get human companionship is a beautiful thing. So you got your start running D&D, and you mentioned like I'm kind of curious. You mentioned you did some things to sort of streamline combat, and D&D combat is one of my. I believe there's actually on our channel a game where I just start sighing heavily. I got like the first time they wrote me back into playing D&D, I just like at like hour 3, I'm just like. Like, there was no attempt to even hide my. So like how I talked with Connie Chang who but because they I think run really fun, fast-paced, cinematic, wacky combat, and I don't have that skill set. When it comes to D&D, I'm very like, all right, sevens, who's going on a and that sort of. And so like how are some ways you kind of sped that up?
So when I first started, like about 8 years ago with the family game, it was just sort of like straight combat. And so that's when I started looking for resources like online to kind of help with that. And so just getting like, the first thing was getting like turn order things for me to figure out. And so there were these little like slips of paper that I would just keep on the edge of my DM screen, and with the order, and just kind of make sure everybody could see it on their end as well, so we both could see it. And so that's more, I guess, something more tactile, but
super important though. Like those organizational things can really make a difference.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I ended up also printing out on my 3D printer condition rings, because that was one of the things that people were forgetting.
Yeah.
So another sort of tactile thing, and so just popping those on their little characters. I'm like, okay, yeah, everybody remembers now that you're blinded.
That's handy, huh?
And then for like just actual combat, that's when I started getting more into running sort of the bigger groups as one. And so if you'd have like a bunch of goblins that you're fighting, either depending on how many you're fighting, breaking them up into, groups, like 2 or 3 groups, and then having them go at the same time and kind of figuring stuff out like that. Because that was our really big thing, was like because we were playing, we first started, what were we playing? Oh no, this was a homebrew. Actually, it was a homebrew that I had set up. And so there was just a bunch of goblins for whatever reason, and so we were just the very first time we played something like that, it took forever. And so that's when I was like, okay, now we're gonna be bringing these into groups, make it a but big faster.
Yeah, that sort of feeling of D&D combat was one. It's funny. Most other people are like, I looked at other game systems because I wanted to like get more narrative and that sort of thing. I just wanted to get away from D&D combat. Like that was my. And so you guys are about to start up a Powered by the Apocalypse game. Which flavor are you running?
So this is one, it's called Demigods, by Jason. What is Jason's last name? His name is, it's probably okay on Twitter. I can't remember his last name. His first name is Jason. He's really cool.
That's a good Twitter handle.
Yeah, I love it. And on Twitch. He's on Twitch too. Under that. But I was wanting to find a game that we could play that we would be, sort of like gods, right? And I'm like, I want to do a different system. And so I ended up just kind of searching and finding, and found Powered by the Apocalypse. I hadn't even played it yet, that system yet. But
so is this like a Percy Jackson flavor of that?
Yeah, it's sort of Percy Jackson flavor, exactly.
And so the playbooks are based around these different gods.
Exactly.
And how how is it? So normally when I think of, and this is again dorky white guy, I think Greek gods, Roman gods. Does this have the opportunity for a little more flavor? Like Anansi, I think, would be a fantastic addition to this sort of thing.
Yeah, so it does. And if I remember right, it actually even has sort of a note with that, and even like options from the different like Pantheons. And so when we created our characters, that was one thing I said, was like, hey, choose any Pantheon that you want. Like, it doesn't have to be Greek. It doesn't have to be, whatever. And so we actually got a pretty good mix of Pantheons.
Nice. That's cool.
From the group. And so, and that actually helped me kind of come up with the story that we're going to tell. And so that's.
And is this your first time running an Apocalypse World game, a Powered by the Apocalypse game?
I've run a couple of one-shots since then with it, but yeah, an actual campaign, this will be my first Powered by the Apocalypse campaign.
I've talked about it repeatedly on here, but I love Apocalypse Engine games. I think it's such a neat system. And one thing that I really am interested to see how people handle is like the character advancement, because the experience, whatever you want to call it, can be so different from game to game. So how does Demigods sort of do character advancement in this case?
So it's sort of based off of, I guess, the relationships and the strings and, and things like that. And so and then that's how you end up picking up more like moves from the playbooks.
Okay, so it's all H based off H, kind of like the original.
Yeah.
My weird hang up question always, does it still have the sex moves that Apocalypse World has? Because like
I don't think so.
Yeah, I imagine with younger, with a younger theme. Because like when the first time I played Apocalypse World, I was like, this is maybe the perfect intro role-playing game.
Mm-hmm.
But then the calling them overtly sex moves kind of, makes me want to have a conversation about consent before, and which is maybe not the best. Well, maybe it is a good way to do an intro RPG. Probably.
Absolutely.
So you guys just did session 0 for this.
We've done session 0 for, we actually
not just, you did it a while ago.
Well, yeah, it's been a while ago, but it's funny because we actually did it last year.
Oh wow.
For the first time.
Right.
And then
session 0.5.
Yeah. So we really had some stuff going on, and then like we weren't able to stream a lot of last year, like after that session 0. Life stuff happened with the group. And so I was like, oh, like we're gonna start up again. We're ready, everybody ready to start. And everybody's like, yeah, we're ready to start. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like rerun our first session 0, to come to find out that the audio did not get recorded for whatever reason. So I was like, y'all want to play that intro again? So yeah, we did the intro again. A little while ago. And so
funny. Well, now it's so much more timely.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you're running a session 0, obviously session 0 is different with your sort of crew that and that sort of thing, versus like I'm doing a stream with people I don't know. We're gonna have a more fulsome conversation. But how are you, as a GM, how are you setting up that session 0 to set up all the players for success?
So yeah, like exactly like you said, it's very different with the Dicey Amazons than if I'm running a game for other people. So with the Dicey Amazons, since we've been playing for so long and like we know each other so well, it's very easy to sort of set up a game with, okay, like I know that this person does not like this. Like Darcy, everybody knows, does not like spiders. Like, so we will never have spiders during our game because Darcy doesn't like spiders. But where we really get into, like, if we're starting a new game, like once I read through like the whole game and sort of the theme that the games are bringing, those are the things that I'll bring to the group if it's something that we haven't talked about. And so that's what makes it different for the Dicey Amazons, is because like I already know like a good chunk of them, but like depending on whatever game that we're playing, if that brings up something new, then that's when we, go back and say, okay, let's talk about this. Are y'all okay with this? We can scrap that, things like that. And then just checking in, throughout the campaign to make sure everybody's still good with things and making sure we don't need to do any changes.
So this is, I don't want to get too inside baseball here, but like one of the things I've found running games on stream is that I will openly talk with my players about things that are coming up.
Yeah.
I'm not giving them a script and saying like, here's what you can expect, but I'll be like, hey, there's going to be, next session, there's probably going to be a pretty meaty combat, or, next session, there's a conversation that could go either way, that sort of thing. And so how much of that do you set up in a session 0, sort of giving them do you give them a sense of kind of the arc of the story, or are you more like, I want to let them explore and find stuff? Because that's the other weird part of stream games, is that there's I don't know, entertainment factor might be the wrong word, but there's, it's a presentation. And so some of the kind of, we're going to spend 3 hours shopping in my home game maybe isn't going to, be great for, although that doesn't stop them.
Yeah.
So like, where do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, so I will usually give them sort of a general arc of the game. And then if there is something that's, sort of not important, but just something that's possibly heavy coming up, I usually will give them, a bit of a heads up, like, hey, this is something that's based off of, what you guys have done so far. This is what's coming up. And so, if they have any questions, they can ask questions and things like that. I do tend to be sort of a GM that likes surprises. And so I do try to keep the surprises not like heavy things, I guess. So that's something that I do to sort of just make sure that, they can still enjoy those, and, and I can still enjoy like doing my thing with the surprises.
You talk about surprises, how much of your stuff is just improv? Like, you talked about you ran a homebrew before.
Yeah.
And now this, it sounds like this Demigods game is going to be a homebrew because you're figuring out
it
this
is.
story. So how much of this is just sort of improv, like made up kind of as, oh, when that character did that thing, it made me think of this? And
I would probably say at this point, probably 90%.
Yeah.
When I first started, I would like, oh, okay, like, basically writing stories, like this is what's gonna happen. And then I'm like, okay, no, they're not doing that. And so I need to like, let's, rechunk that, and we'll just go from there. Like there was this one, our first campaign streaming live was a D&D campaign that I homebrewed, and I was trying to give them a house, like a weird house, is sort of a waypoint in the city.
Like,
and I'm like, oh yeah, it's this tall house, and it has like this weird little like, spinny thing, like, just spin to it. And they're like, let's go to the house. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I went with it, and it ended up being a very important part of the game, because a person that they sort of needed ended up living there because they decided to go there.
Yeah.
So
look, I think that's a great lesson for any GM. Is like, play the game your players want to play.
Yeah.
And if they want to go to the weird house, go to the weird house and make the weird house important. Like it's really hard to it's really rough when a GM is like, well, you need to get back to the desert. And the players are like, we like this house. What's going on with this house? And that conflict doesn't help. Conflict is a strong word, but that kind of dichotomy doesn't help anybody. It's going to ground the game to a halt, and the tie goes to the players. Like, do the thing. If they're telling you they want to do an investigative game, guess what? You're running an investigative game now.
Yeah.
And start watching Columbo or something. Have you ever had that happen where you just found out that like the game you were running was not the game your players wanted to play?
Yeah, that just kind of tends to happen with most of the games because of the people that I play with. They go totally off the rails, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily trying to railroad them, but like it's they go way left field. And so I'm like, okay, we'll just roll with it. I think it's made me a better storyteller because I, thinking on my feet and just like, okay, why is this important now when it wasn't before?
The other secret to that is I do so much less prep than I used to.
Oh yeah.
Because
absolutely.
I'm just like, back in the day, I'd be like, I'm going to make spell lists. I'm going to have all this stuff. And now I'm just like, A, I'll make all that stuff up that has any spells I need it to have. And B, they're not going to go there anyway. So, let's say, I still remember one of our channel members GM'd for the first time, and she was running Salt Marsh. And she's like, oh, they didn't go in the room with the coolest thing. And I'm like, that's the first room they go into. It doesn't matter what the map says. They open that door, give them the cool stuff. Like don't worry about what the map says. Just, make it all hand wavy and give them the good stuff. That's because opening the third empty room is not gonna, your players are gonna start wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
and start tearing things up. Do you prefer to run homebrew or like deconstructed printed stuff? What is your
I think I prefer homebrew only because I like creating game, just stories and things like that. But sometimes I do like getting into other people's stuff. And so like every once in a while I'll do, like, I think I did a Christmas one shot, and I found like a nice little Christmas themed game that somebody had wrote. And so I'm like, okay, this is cool, And so every once in a while I'll jump in and go looking for something with a specific theme. But most of the time I tend to homebrew stuff.
When you're homebrewing, do you start with the end? Do you know where kind of where they're going and what the end is, and then you build out from that? Or because like one of the reasons that I use printed materials a lot and then just rip them apart ridiculously is that I have found my homebrew stuff always has a third act problem. Like, I'm really good at making an interesting setting.
Yeah.
Cool stuff's going to happen. Don't know how it's all going to end.
Yeah. I lost the question.
When you're homebrewing something, do you have a sense of the end? Are you building to the end, or are you kind of like, I'm going to make the middle? Because like I'm going to make the middle, and the end will figure itself out.
Yeah, I do a little bit of both. So for the larger games, I have sort of a very light idea of what I want the end to look like. And especially if it's something like the Demigods campaign, I think we're gonna do specific seasons, like a couple of different seasons.
Right.
And so I kind of like, okay, like we're gonna probably stop here, and that's where I want this to end, like with this happening. But when I've homebrewed one shots, those are the ones where I'm like, okay, like this is the end. Like, like I have to have this end because it'll just end up going forever. So
that's another weird aspect of running on stream is time constraints. Because like I know we're gonna have a break and we're gonna have an end, and I'm always like, can I get what's a cliffhanger I can get, and I'm always like, and so like you can there are a couple times you can see me being like, okay, how can I string this on for another 10 minutes so I can...
I actually ran a one shot on Utopia's channel. It was actually I wrote an adventure hack for kids on bikes / brooms.
Oh, nice.
Which it involves the future. So like future kids going back to the past and possibly working with their grandparents, to figure out like some sort of thing. Yeah. And so it was a one shot, and I'm like, okay, how am I gonna I want to finish this one shot. And so I finished like the story, like the mystery. But then I was like, okay, I don't know why I have to do this, like some sort of cliffhanger, even if it's a one shot. And so like at the end of this adventure hack, you're supposed to sort of end up back in the future. And what the cliffhanger I did was, you end up finding your teacher. They're able to fix the time travel device, and everything happens. You feel, that you're going through time, and you end up at your location, and you look around, and there's flying cars, and there's like all of this. And so they ended up like 200 years, and I'm
way far in the future,
like way further in the future. And so I don't know why.
Building for a sequel,
Right. And so even though I finished that story, that mystery in that one shot, I still had to be just a little bit, and it was great because they were like, "Oh, what?" And then it was over.
Oh, that sounds. It's fun too when you. That's one of the fun things about a one shot is you can play with the ending like that. You're like, nope, that's all. The rest, you can fit. And they're like, no, what happens next? I'm like, well, go write fanfic, I guess.
Right, exactly. There you go.
So, we talked a little bit early about you're purposefully wanting Dicey Amazons to have women and non-binary folks of color front and center, and this, I hate that I have to ask this question because the answer should be self-evident, but why is that important? Why do you think that's important?
So I mentioned that like before I started the Dicey Amazons, and even like playing with the family game, like I was watching streams and there wasn't a lot out with people of color at the time. Yeah. Except for like Rivals, and then what's the other one? Actually, they probably weren't out that long ago, but like Plot Hunters was another one.
And Critical Role's one black,
and then Critical Role was a big one. And so I was watching like all three of those, and I'm like, and then I was like seeing all these other ones. I'm like, and it's all mostly white. It's all, you know, a lot of them were mostly men at that point. There wasn't even a lot of like women playing at that point. And so I'm like, I really want to see more. And if we can get out there and do more, maybe we can inspire others to do the same. And so that was one of the main reasons why we had started. We had actually talked about that when we were deciding whether we wanted to do this. And so, and that everybody agreed, and I'm like, yeah, let's go. And so, and we've actually had people come, you know, like message us and say like, hey, you know, thank you so much for, you know, starting the Dicey Amazons. Like, you know, we are streaming because of you. We, you know, we were actually able to see other people doing this that look like us. And, you know, and it's been amazing.
Representation matters. It's just,
it does.
You know, it seems like it's a silly thing, but it is not. Like the power of seeing someone that looks like you doing an awesome thing that you want to do, you know, I don't think we can have enough of it. And there's so many, you know, whether it's the stuff that Asians Represent is doing, or the stuff y'all or Motherlands, or you know, there's no level. I mean, you know, heck, we could do an all Jewish game. You know, like there's no limit to where the representation can go. And here's the thing, this isn't pie. Letting Black people have more games doesn't mean you get less games. There's we'll make a bigger table. Yeah, you know, there's plenty of room to have all of these games, and you know, finding like, seek out, if you just, as you're watching this, find Black voices and voices of color on Twitter. Just follow in gaming. They're out there in the TTRPG world, and because of the way Twitter works, you follow a few Black voices, you're going to find more Black voices. And all of a sudden, you've got this awesome chorus of people who may think totally differently than you, but are doing this thing you love in a cool way. And like, we all need more diversity in everything we do.
Yeah, there's so many more like streams and groups out now that feature people of color than when we first started, and it's so good to see. There's definitely room for more, but it's multiplied exponentially. Now
we need to do it in board games.
Yes, I'm on it too. I'm I'm ready to get into that too.
Only, you know, I mean, it's hard to find. There's a few, but not many. Well, Kandi, this has been awesome. Folks, the Dicey Amazons, if they've got a game they're running, you're gonna have a good time. You're gonna laugh. They are profoundly silly. They don't take the game seriously, and it's just a good time. You can find in the on the YouTube page there, I've got all the information for finding Dicey Amazons. Give them a follow on Twitch. Twitch works like Twitter. If you start following Black cool streams on Twitter, more Black cool streams are going to be popping up for you, and that's an awesome thing. So, Kandi, we end every episode with the same little GM questionnaire. What is your favorite game to run?
Oh, my favorite game to run. Oh my goodness. That's such a hard question because I like games for different reasons.
Well, so break out a couple.
But let's see. Favorite game to run. I think right now it probably is Apocalypse. It's probably Powered by the Apocalypse. But I'm super duper excited to run a Haunted West game at some point this year. Because I got that big old book.
Oh, I had Chris on to talk about the game, and like he has 500 pages that didn't make it in. There's like another phone book.
Yeah,
that is not, it's still out there. Haunted West is outstanding. I'm super excited for that. That's awesome. What is a game you haven't run that you'd love to run? I kind of just said it, but.
But there is another one. I haven't ever run like Vampire.
Oh yeah, like any World of Darkness or Vampire specifically.
Yeah, actually, in no World of Darkness actually.
but is Vampire the one you really want to run?
Yeah, because I really like vampires.
Yeah, and so like all the World of Darkness games are so different. You know, like they all like the werewolf game is different than the hunters game, then is different than the vampire game, and that sort of thing. So what is it? Just because you really like vampires, or you want to be slinky and sexy and do all the weird political stuff?
I've just been a big fan of vampires for a while, so I think something that's actually written specifically for vampires would be a lot of fun. And I've seen like a bunch of the different streams out. The one that B Dave ran, like
they should give B Dave stock. He is he has sold more copies of Vampire.
So definitely that one. I mean, I do like werewolves too, but I'm a vampire.
So we close with the Space Jam question. Kandi, aliens are invading the Earth, and they will destroy the planet where I keep all of my stuff if you don't run them a wildly entertaining 4-hour game. What are you running to keep these aliens from destroying the Earth?
You know what? Let's put them into some teenage relationships and let's run some Monster Hearts.
Oh, yes! Oh, outstanding! No one has said Monster Hearts, and that has secretly Monster Hearts has been the right answer the whole time. So why? Unpack that.
So there is nothing more time consuming than teenage angst, and so that and fun. Like if you're not actively in it, but you get to play it, like. It's a lot of fun, right? And so
the ridiculous, like the stupidest thing being the most important thing, Oh man, yeah, no, they would. Although the worry is they'd all hate each other afterwards,
Well, if they hate each other, that's fine.
Because they didn't take to prom or whatever. Oh man, have you played Masks at all?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so Masks is slowly replacing Monster Heart for me as my teen angst game of choice. Because I really like you like vampires. I really like superhero stuff.
I like everything. I like superhero stuff too. Like my comic that I'm writing has superheroes and vampires and wolves. Like it's just it's wild.
It's everything.
Yeah, it's everything that I love.
Oh man. Well, so you can find Kandi on Twitter. You can find the Dicey Amazons on Twitch, and their information is there. Kandi, thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Thank you, Ezra. Yes, so much fun.
I now want to get like you and Morgan together and just do a Powered by the Apocalypse megapod. You know what? That's gonna happen. I'm gonna put it down there right now. I'm speaking it into existence.
All right, Mo, we got it. Come on, Mo.
When she was on, she has a spreadsheet of every Powered by the Apocalypse game, and so she can tell me exactly how many there are. It's like 300. There's just like it's crazy.
Not surprised.
Crazy. All right, I've ended this thing 3 times now. So goodbye, internet friends.
Bye.